Welcome to Washington in Focus Daily. It is Friday, June the 5th, 2026. I'm Carlene Johnson, the Center Square's state government reporter. And in today's episode, Montana's governor has the welcome mat rolled out for Washington business. We told you earlier this week that Seadrill-Woolley-based Janicki Industries is expanding in Big Sky Country instead of Washington. I had a conversation with Montana's governor yesterday about their gain and our loss. I'll share that with you. Then Pierce County's Charter Commission appears to be working to implement the same types of things that Senate Bill 5974, some called the anti-sheriff bill, which was put on hold by a Thurston County judge earlier this year. It looks like Pierce County's Charter Commission is hoping to move forward with this at any rate, including making the elected sheriff an appointed position. Right now, King County, the only county of the 39 in Washington state that has an appointed rather than elected sheriff. And Pierce County Sheriff Keith Swank has something to say about that. And then finally, if you didn't see it yet, another vandal struck at the Washington State Legislative Building in Olympia very early on Thursday morning. Did a bunch of damage, did not break in, because after the break-in last October, they put in some additional measures, some film covering on some of those windows and door coverings that are glass. So he didn't get in. They got him after a pursuit. We're going to share some of that video and some images from the damage that he created in today's episode of Washington in Focus. We start, though, with the governor of Montana, Greg Gianforte, who told me in a conversation we had on Thursday that he hopes to lure more business out of Washington and other states into his state. Now, this follows the announcement this week of Seadrill-Woolley's Janicki Industries. They chose Great Falls for a pretty significant expansion for their manufacturing campus. They could have found other property, even adjacent to Seadrill-Woolley. They already have some land outside of Seadrill-Woolley in Hamilton, Washington. They're already in Utah, but this is a pretty dramatic expansion of their footprint, up to 2,000 additional employees in the years to come. And that's the current number of employees they have. So this is a huge loss for Washington and a great gain for Montana. And the governor there told me, among other things, he says, we want entrepreneurs. They're like golden geese, he told me. He basically wanted to say, we'll show you a couple things. He told me, we are open for business. We've been deregulating. He's a Republican, you might imagine, based on some of these statements. We have eliminated or streamlined 35% of all the regulations in the state. We've had multiple tax reductions. We think people should keep the fruits of their labor. Now, as reported by the Center Square in Washington in Focus Daily earlier this week, Janicki's $800 million expansion and their investment in Montana is going to be 2 million square feet of production space over the next decade. And that creates initially 1,000 new jobs. And then once this whole campus is complete, they expect up to 2,000 new jobs for Big Sky Country. So that is a huge gain for Montana for sure. And Janicki's communication and education outreach manager, Nick Lavaca, told me earlier this week that, in his opinion, Olympia lawmakers just don't seem to get it. He said they seem out of touch with how business really operates.
But if you ever have to sit across the table from somebody that you really like, that you enjoy, that you've worked with, who's helped build your company, and you have to let them go because you just simply don't have the revenue coming in, that's difficult. You know there are health issues, there are family issues, there are graduations and weddings of their kids. You know what they're going through, and you have to sit across the table from them and tell them, you know, you helped me build this business, but right now business is in a slump and I can't afford to keep you. And you know where you're sending them. That's a very difficult position to be in. And it's one that years ago the Janickis had to wrestle with. And they took great losses in their company to keep people employed. But, you know, it's been a little bit of an up and down during 2008, as you know, and various things. So they know that pain and they don't ever want to experience that pain. And I believe people in Olympia that have owned businesses know that pain. And I don't think that enough people have had to sit across from somebody and experience that.
I want to put up a couple of other quotes from my conversation with Montana Governor Greg Gianforte. I tried to get him on a Zoom interview so we could share the video with you, but he was in transit and couldn't do that. I was lucky to get him on the phone. He says, "Yeah, come. We've got the welcome mat out. We want to." Well, he says, "We want them to lay golden W-2 eggs because we want more good-paying jobs in Montana." And then he said there's two primary things that they offer businesses in addition to, just having a pro-business climate. He said one is quality of life. And I mentioned that because that's been one of the main things that folks in Washington state have said, no businesses are going to leave. We've got the quality of life here. We've got the mountains. We've got the ocean. We've got the lakes. We've got all of it. He says, we've got all that as well, minus the ocean. But he said the quality of life in Montana is, people want to come there to raise a family, low crime, lots of open space, hiking, camping, hunting, fishing, lots of things that people here in Washington hold very important to them. And then he said that having a work ethic that won't quit, as he puts it, is something Montanans have grown up on a farmer ranch. And I love this quote. He said, "I always say if it's harvest time and the tractor's broke, you don't call a consultant, you don't form a committee, you just fix the tractor." So he said basically his message to not just Washington business looking to relocate and still kind of be in mountain country, if you will, is you're in one of those high tax states. Do you want to move back to America? So I found that conversation to be really interesting. I did reach out to the office of Governor Bob Ferguson to see if they had any comment. At the time we're doing this podcast here on Friday, I received no response from the office. Now, the Pierce County Charter Review Commission is right now in the middle of considering a couple of potential amendments that would have to go to Pierce County voters. And there may be many amendments, but the two we're talking about today have to do with amending the county charter to create an independent ombudsman office for the sheriff's department. And the second one moves ahead to make the sheriff in Pierce County an appointed, not elected position. Right now in the state of Washington, only King County's sheriff is appointed by the King County executive. All the other 38 counties in the state of Washington put it up to voters. Who do you want to be your sheriff? It's an elected position and something that most people across the state hold pretty important to them. We want to elect our sheriff. We want him to reflect our values and priorities, potentially our politics. And that is something that Pierce County's Charter Commission is looking to potentially change. So I watched a meeting on Wednesday night. There was a packed room of people at that Charter Commission meeting, speaking on both sides of the issue, really. And they were talking about the sheriff issues, the ombudsman creation for office, and whether or not to make it an appointed, not elected position. There was a woman named Barb Church who came up to testify against Sheriff Keith Swank, who was there. That's Pierce County Sheriff. And she said, our current sheriff has threatened lawmakers in the legislature if they would pass 5974. That is the legislation that was passed this year to do these things that Pierce County is considering. He said, this is Barb Church speaking. He said he would gather thousands of people to rally around the county city building and protest. Now, she was referring to when Sheriff Swank did go before lawmakers during a legislative hearing and testifying in opposition to Senate Bill 5974 and said, just try to remove me from office. Just try to do this. And my supporters will surround the county city building in my defense. And he still stands by those comments that he made. They were intentionally inflammatory, and some folks, even the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs, condemned that. But he stands by it to this day, saying, I would say it again. And he told me in an interview on Thursday that even without Senate Bill 5974, which again, currently, if you're not aware of where this is legally, a judge in Thurston County basically put it on hold and said, I believe this may very well be unconstitutional. You can't just say that, you're going to have this unelected body remove elected sheriffs from office. So she is kind of granted a stay, if you will, in favor of those who challenged, including Sheriff Keith Swank and some others. But Pierce County is moving ahead to basically do the same thing, regardless of what happens with 5974. So here's part of my conversation with Sheriff Keith Swank.
Well, I think that they were wanting to pass this regardless of 5974. They just wanted to piggyback on it. So it was already set up. Some of those commissioners ran for the commission saying they wanted to make the sheriff an appointed position. They're the ones from Tacoma, from like District 4, which is where the executive is from. So those people that are there, he endorsed some of them and is behind that. Although he hasn't come out and said anything like that, like I want to get rid of Sheriff Swank, but we all know that he's would have rather have my opponent be the sheriff and probably wants to appoint his own sheriff too. So the executive before him, Bruce Danmeyer, I heard wanted to appoint his sheriff too because he didn't like the sheriff telling him no about things. So a lot of these people become these executives and they want to have complete control. No kings except for if they're the king.
Now, Sheriff Swank also told me that the bulk of those he represents support keeping the office as an elected position. And he said, even those who don't like him. He told me he gets tons of emails, phone calls, people that show up at community meetings, and he's out there in the community all the time. Say, I didn't vote for you, and I probably wouldn't vote to reelect you, but I would like to retain my right to vote to put the next guy in office. I don't want that to be something that the Pierce County executive, someone that is appointed. You might have a far right, elected executive in Pierce County who wants to put a far right sheriff in office, and the people that don't support that want to be able to have some say in it. So he broke down pretty particularly for me the two amendments related to the office of the sheriff that the commission is looking at.
Right. So the two different charter amendments. One is to make the sheriff an appointed position appointed by the executive. And then in addition to that, they still want to have an ombuds to be able to get there and say, I'm going to oversee and control the sheriff's office. The ordinance itself doesn't have very much teeth in it. And technically and legally, they have to negotiate and bargain that with the deputies union. But the other thing is, hypothetically, if it were to pass this fall, if it gets on the ballot and were to pass, I'm not participating in it. They can do whatever they want to do. I'm not going to give them any records. I'm not going to do anything at all because I want to see what they're going to do then. What they're going to do. They don't have, it's not criminal. It's all just cooperative. Well, if you're against me like that, I'm not cooperating with you, right? So, which would be funny. I like to see what they do about that. I don't think it will pass anyhow when we go out there. I think it might end up on the ballot. I don't think that people will vote for it when we go out there and tell them about what this is all is. It's overreach from the executive and whatnot. But the other thing too is it is a recipe for criminality on behalf of the executive. He can do whatever they want to do. Not this current one. I'm talking about future ones or whatever. I'm not saying he's criminal. Anybody can be a criminal then. And then they pick the sheriff that they want, and then they threaten him with the ombuds. If you do anything to go against me, we'll go after this because the ombuds would be picked by him also. So this is complete corruption at its finest.
Now, the 21-member Charter Review Commission still has to vote whether or not they're going to advance this. That'll happen later in June. And then if, in fact, they vote to push these couple of amendments forward to voters, that will be on the November ballot. Sheriff Swank told me there's a number of other things. In fact, I saw that debated at the meeting I viewed the other evening. One, it has to do with eminent domain. He said there could be up to 12 or 15 charter amendments on the ballot for voters to weigh in on come November. And then, of course, if passed, these two sheriff charter review amendments, if they're passed, the Pierce County Council would then be required to create an ordinance to implement the office. And that is going to be subject to bargaining for the Pierce County Deputies Union. According to Sheriff Swank, That's a non-starter for the union. So even if voters did approve these two issues in November, it does still have to go to bargaining for the Pierce County Sheriff's Union. And Sheriff Swank feels confident that the union would ultimately say, we're not going for this. We're not going to have an ombudsman over our office, and we're not going to have an appointed, unelected sheriff. Now, lastly, in today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily, I don't know if you saw the images or you saw any of the video. We're going to share it with you now if you have not. The damage is estimated at least $100,000 for a vandal that attempted to smash into and gain access to the Washington Legislative Building in Olympia on the Capitol campus. This happened very early on Thursday morning. It was 13 window casings and a couple of doors on that building. Now, security film now covers those windows and the glass door entrances. I'm very familiar with it, and I noticed it during this year's legislative session that they looked a little bit different when you get on campus. That's because last October we had a vandal that did gain access and caused nearly $1 million in damage, including destroying some precious artifacts in our state capitol building. So they've got some kind of protective film on the windows. So he smashed or attempted to smash in those windows, did cause some damage and shattered those windows, but did not gain access. So the Department of Enterprise Services today was up there boarding, or rather on Thursday was up there boarding up the damaged windows, which were on the north and west sections of the building's Capitol campus. And I learned today that the suspect is identified by Washington State Patrol as 21-year-old Clayton Stephen Seaborn. So 21. He was seen on the surveillance video here attempting to shatter the windows. Now, both State Patrol and Olympia police ended up responding, and they pursued this guy, got back in his car, and they chased him over to nearby Heritage Park and Marathon Park. He drove his vehicle along a pedestrian bridge, not meant for a vehicle to be going across, but it links those two parks, and then he crashed. And according to the Department of Enterprise Services, they've closed that bridge off to pedestrians while they make sure that, him driving across, whatever damage he did, didn't compromise the structure. But the video of his arrest shows officers contacting him as he laid there on his stomach near the railroad tracks at the south end of Marathon Park. So I don't know what was going on. They did end up getting the guy for DUI. Apparently gave a field sobriety test and they got him on suspected DUI, also assault in the second degree and malicious mischief in the first degree. I'm glad they were on it. I'm glad they had the film protectant on those windows and doors so the guy couldn't get inside. I don't know what his intentions were. I don't know what they might have found in his vehicle. I don't know what his political leanings are and what he was upset or bent on. But I'm so grateful for the rapid response of police that they got this guy, because it was October 5th of last year an intruder broke into that building and caused significant damage in several areas. The state reception room, where there are a lot of priceless, irreplaceable historical artifacts. And some of those were damaged, including a 1928 chenille rug that was set on fire. Damage from that guy estimated at up to $1 million. Last time I was in that state reception room, there was sort of a makeshift covering over the area that was damaged from that rug. Also burned through the floor underneath. He burned some American flags. He burned some drapes. I mean, the guy was bent on doing a lot more damage than he ultimately got away with. But in that case, it was a 29-year-old guy by the name of Governor Schubert, and he was arrested as he tried to exit the building. They were getting some alerts going off, going, there's somebody inside the building doing some damage, and they arrested him. He was charged with first-degree burglary, first-degree arson, and malicious mischief. So glad they got the guy in the incident yesterday morning and that he was not able to gain access to the people's house in Olympia. So that is it for today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily for this Friday, June the 5th. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Get some downtime with family. get to relax, enjoy the Sabbath maybe, and I hope to see you again next week on Monday. Have a great weekend.